Kids in Texas are back to school this week. However, for the almost 200,000 public school students in Houston, the largest school district by far in Texas, this year is on track to be very different. That's because this past June, the state of Texas took over the Houston public schools following what they called inadequate test scores. The state started by removing elected school board members and ushering in a new superintendent who in turn announced a, quote, new education system. In that system, discipline is prioritized over libraries and books. Over the summer, librarian jobs were eliminated in 28 schools across Houston. Some of the libraries have been repurposed, turned into so-called team centers, meant for disciplining students who misbehave in class. This change sparked outcry across the heavily Democratic city, where over 80% of the kids in schools are Black and Hispanic. NBC News correspondent Antonia Hilton is covering all of this on the ground in Houston, and she brings us this report.
Lately, Houston mom Lauren Simmons struggles to recognize her own city. She came up through the very same school system that her 3rd and 11th grader now attend. But this year, her daughter's school won't have a full library.
It's been a real struggle for me because I should just be able to wake up, drive my kids 5 minutes down the street, and they be at schools that are filled with great educators, that have all of the fancy, programs and after-school programs, and that's just not our reality.
What did the library mean to you when you were a kid coming up in this same system?
The library was everything. I'm the kid that's checking out 10 books, and I'm checking out 10 more books, and I'm at home under the cover reading books.
Over the summer, dozens of Houston schools replaced their libraries with team centers, where students will do work or go when they misbehave. Many librarians were laid off or reassigned to new jobs. The changes overwhelmingly impacted Black and Latino neighborhoods, so Lauren and other moms spent their summer going to meetings and protests, demanding to be heard.
I want you to look in my face and remember me because I'm your new best friend.
That sign is right.
Republicans have made parental rights a centerpiece of the GOP platform, arguing that parents have the right to demand that books be removed from schools, that lessons on race and gender be restricted. But this spring, when the state of Texas took over the Houston Independent School District of almost 200,000 kids, in a blue city, in a red state, there was little outcry from those same parental rights activists. The state replaced their elected school board members. They pushed out the superintendent.
So taking these principles to
and brought in former Dallas superintendent and charter school founder Mike Miles. Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner thinks the move is anti-democratic.
I'm not going to try to sugarcoat it. It's a hostile takeover where the people are not accountable to the parents or the teachers or the local community or the students. They're appointed by the people at the state.
Is Houston in conflict with its own state government?
Well, Houston has been in conflict with its own state government for years. What's happening here with HISD cannot be viewed separate and apart from the greater picture. Okay, so let's not be fooled.
For years, a number of Houston schools were failing. Parents pleaded for more resources as large numbers of students fell far behind on reading and math. Former district leaders tried to implement new programs, and the state gave them a B rating in 2022. The Texas Education Agency took over HISD anyway. Superintendent Mike Miles' new education system model will emphasize instruction time in the classroom and use team centers like these for the kids who are excelling and the kids who need a timeout. He understands families are anxious about change. He believes it was necessary.
What message do you think is sent to kids, though, who see classmates in other parts of the city who still have functioning, staffed libraries?
So I think kids like to learn. I think kids focus on their schools, and so I think the kids are going to be fine. I think they are very flexible, adaptable. You've seen them already on the first day.
I've spoken to some of the kids in your district. Mm-hmm. One 3rd grader told me that it made her feel angry. Mm-hmm. One 5th grader told me that it made her feel like she's a bad kid who doesn't deserve a library.
So when they come to school, what I've heard and what my staff has heard is nothing but, oh, this is okay. So I think people need to get here. I think the kids will adapt and they will love school like you see kids learning here.
Do you believe librarians are important?
So every single position has value, and it has, a role to play in different places. We can't be all things to all people, and we can't have everything we want. So there's a prioritization that has to happen. Science of reading versus this position.
So does that mean you're robbing Peter to pay Paul?
And no, I wouldn't phrase it that way. What I would say is we're putting in a bold, different model that works.
But parents like Lauren say their wishes are being ignored by the school system.
Do parents here feel heard?
I'm having to literally fight and yell from the rooftops that my children deserve a library. Even prisons have libraries.
Cheryl Hensley worked for HISD for 39 years. She was Lauren's second grade teacher before she became a librarian. She was laid off as part of the takeover.
If we just focus on the classroom, that's just part of the kid. That's just part of your community. I'm building a lifelong learner. I'm building beyond the teacher. I'm giving them a choice. They're going to the classroom and they're told they have to pass this test. They have to read this passage. They have to do these strategies. When they come to me, they're given a book that they choose. They get a book that they want to read.
Was it hard to leave your school?
Extremely hard. Yeah. I still go by. I don't want to be done. These kids were important to me. And I felt like I loved every single one of them.
Lauren says the library that was a lifeline for her as a kid is worth fighting for.
What are my rights as a parent? Are my children not entitled to a quality education in their neighborhood? Like, where does that fit into my American dream? The pursuit of happiness and life and liberty. I don't feel very happy right now. I don't feel very liberated. I don't feel very free. I feel very frustrated. I feel very unheard. And I feel like my children in this district, are being treated like political football.
Lauren's son, James, can already read well, but her daughter, Sydney, struggles with dyslexia.
I think sometimes people forget that there are real people that are impacted by this. Seriously, what am I supposed to do for my baby girl who is doing her best?
They lived in a house in the woods. I don't know why people need to take a library away for no reason. It doesn't make sense, because it's really hard to see a thing that you love to just be poof and gone.
The library was one of Sydney's favorite spaces at school.
You're going into third grade. That's an important year for reading.
Yes.
What are you hoping to still learn? What kind of help do you need?
I need help with words, and I need to read a lot.
What message do you think it sends to you to go to a school that doesn't have a library?
That kids just shouldn't read, or kids like us shouldn't read.
Kids shouldn't read, or kids like us shouldn't read. That is some incredible reporting from NBC News correspondent Antonia Hilton, who's covered many stories of American schools struggling under unique challenges as politics and education policy collide. We're going to talk to her all about that when we come back. Stay with us. City of Houston is run by the Democratic Mayor Sylvester Turner, whom you saw in Antonia's story. In the 2020 presidential election, Harris County, where Houston is located, went blue, as it has in every presidential election since 2008. Joe Biden won the county by more than 13 percentage points. Harris County is one of the most diverse counties in the entire state of Texas. The school district is no different. More than 80% of the 200,000 students enrolled in Houston's independent school district are Black and Latino. And the Republican-led state of Texas is focused on improving the district's test scores by taking away their school libraries. The state-appointed superintendent has instituted a new plan for this school year that will transform the libraries and many of the schools into centers of discipline, literally replacing books with isolation. Mayor Turner says the library plan is creating a prison-like atmosphere in spaces typically associated with learning. NBC's correspondent Antonia Hilton spent a few days in Houston talking to parents and students about these new changes and what it means for their communities. Antonia, literally nobody tells these important stories of our time better than you do. But that last thing you had in your story, that boy saying that kids shouldn't read, or kids like us shouldn't read. I don't know if he recognized that in American history, particularly in the South, particularly in Texas, that was a thing that his ancestors may have faced, a deliberate effort to make sure that certain people did not read. They could not attain self-sufficiency. They could not, in those days, get away from their owners and captors. But in this day, it also keeps people in their place. That was a remarkably resonant piece of a very remarkably resonant story.
Thank you, Allie. You know, that boy is actually a ferocious reader, so he may well know all the history you spelled out right there. And that's really the weight that a lot of these families of color here in Houston are feeling right now. You know, nobody thinks that the school didn't need any kind of reform or change. In fact, in all of the years in which the state was criticizing Houston ISD, the parents were too. They wanted more for their kids. They wanted more resources. They were asking the state for more money. They wanted new programs. They wanted interventionists to help their kids catch up with reading and math. So nobody was saying, you know, nothing here needs to change and the status quo was fine. So they agree with the superintendent on that. But I think for these families who are seeing some of their kids struggle to read and struggle to find points in the day at school, right, where they can also just relax, be themselves, have fun, curl up with a book, the library meant something to them. It meant a lot for those kids to go into that space, to make a decision, a choice about what they wanted to explore that day, and really have agency in that room. And so that's the question that parents tell me they're asking this administration, you know, where is our agency? You know, now that we've lost our elected representatives, where do we get a seat at the table? And if we're going to make all these changes, okay, some changes are good, but what say do we have? And will you partner with us before you move ahead with them? That's sort of what's at stake here. And they see this history and what could happen to kids who look like them, Allie.
So you spoke to the new non-elected appointed superintendent. And I thought something he said was very interesting. When you asked him specifically about libraries, it was stark. I mean, I can't imagine such a thing. I've known of the story for several weeks, but I've not seen the imagery that there are literally libraries without books in them. He said, we can't be all things to all people. We can't have everything we want. I think it's reasonable to say that. We can't have everything we want. We can't be all things to all people. But there are virtually no students in this country who will tell you that the library, whether at school or otherwise, was not central to the being of a child who enjoyed education. So, yeah, can't be all things to all people, but why the libraries? Of all the things to cut, why the libraries?
Well, he sees himself as a reformer. He has a large network of charter schools at which he's implemented this new education system and says that he's seen a track record of success. And here's the logic behind it, that if they're able to take resources, focus more time on instruction in the classroom, and use some of the way in which they've reorganized and removed some positions to increase some teachers' pay, that then those teachers will succeed, they will go above and beyond, they'll do more for kids in the classroom, and kids will get more of that reading instruction and all other kinds of instruction to really catch up with the rest of the state. And so it's not that he doesn't think kids should still read, but he thinks that the library might not necessarily have to be the space for that, that there are other points in the day where kids are going to be able to, of course, read through their ELA classes, through English, read as part of assignments. What librarians have said to me is that they did a whole lot more than just check out books or stand there as kids read, that they found kids who, you know, maybe weren't really that into reading, and they helped them find subjects that they were inspired by, that they would give kids the next book in a series so that they would keep falling in love with reading and in love with authors, that they also would teach classes, you know, to help kids figure out the difference between fact and fiction. How do you evaluate sources? How do you start to cite sources in your first school papers? And librarians were playing all of these roles. And so their concern is, you know, this is so much bigger than, you know, just how do the shelves look in a big room. It's about that culture, all of the pieces and the joy and love of learning that go with it. We got the chance to go inside of the team center, and you can see some of it in the story there, where there are rows and rows of desks in what used to be a library, and then along the wall there are a lot of these shelves where kids are going to be able to, either at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day before they go to the bus, grab books sort of on an honors system. And kids may well do that. We didn't get to see any kids actually do that today, but the other piece that librarians are concerned about is that, you know, if the books are just there in the corners and along the walls, kids are going to forget about the library, and it just won't be a focal part of school culture anymore.
You spoke to the parent of a child in the school system that has disabilities, and they're worried about how this transformation of libraries is going to affect their children, especially their children and their ability to learn English. Let's just listen to that together.
Yo tengo un niño con autismo y el otro que es muy hiperactivo. Una idea lo que yo batallo con mis bebés.
¿Han dado suficiente información a las familias latinas?
No nos han dado nada de información.
Tell me a bit more about that.
You just met a mom there named Selena Manzano. She has children who are heading into one of these schools, one of these NES schools where the library has been transformed. She has a son with autism, one son with ADHD, and her concern that she told me is that her kids' special needs will be interpreted or misinterpreted in the classroom, and that they may then be sent to spend some time in one of these team centers for discipline. And her other major concern here is that she says she hasn't received enough information in Spanish. And this is a district in which in some schools, the majority of kids are Latino. The majority of kids have parents who do not speak English at home. Many of them are going home and they can't practice reading with an adult who can help them read their assignments that day or dive into a book written in English. And so getting that instruction in school, that support in school, is really all those kids have. And so these parents are doing their best right now. I actually got to spend time with one mom named Jessica Campos, who speaks both English and Spanish, and she's been translating. She sends out text messages, she sends out emails to all of the Spanish-speaking parents around her neighborhood to try to give them an update on the questions that she asked administration, the information she received from their teachers, so she can try to give them, you know, that sense of feeling like they still have a say in their school. At that elementary pew, the principal no longer speaks Spanish, who has been put in place now after this takeover, and so there's a lot of anxiety there, and I think, you know, it's going to take a couple weeks before we have a sense of how this new system really works. You know, I've spoken to people who are working through it, who are excited, who say that the pay increases are going to help, that the teachers are going to be more excited, more engaged now. But right now, the parents, they're describing chaos. And that's for parents both who speak English as a first language and for parents who are still learning, Allie.
We're going to follow it closely with you, Antonia. Thanks for your fantastic reporting on this. Antonia Hilton for us in Houston.